Rick Allen, and each Monday in this room, right about this time, we start doing what y'all were just doing now. We start networking. About a quarter to the hour, we actually begin a formal meeting of something we call Power Partners. Power Partners is a referral group that is part of the Ahwatukee Chamber. As part of the Ahwatukee Chamber, being part of the chamber means that you're welcome to come here as long as, every Monday, as long as your industry is not already filled in the slot. We have quite a few industry slots that are filled, but otherwise you're welcome. At this event, once a month, we do something called Idea Factory. I'm going to let John tell you a little bit about that in just a moment. But we would love to have you come back and visit us at one of our Power Partner meetings.
Well, welcome to this month's Idea Factory. We host this, like Rick said, every month on the third Monday. And we usually try to cover topics that come from just, it could be about marketing, could be about branding, could be about how do you do accounting, legal support. We also do a lot on social media. So these are really good lunch and learn opportunities. And our hope is that you'll walk away from this Idea Factory today, like every Idea Factory, with some idea you can take back into your business to help you in building your business. As you all have been given, if you don't have one, please come grab one or raise your hand and I'll bring one over to you. Give one over to you, Michelle. This form here is really helpful to us to let us know what you're getting out of it. It also kind of helps you kind of document kind of what idea that you have. So we would like you to turn it in, but so if you have some information on it that is important to you, just take a snapshot of this and then turn this into us at the end of the meeting. We do ask during the presentation, we do about a 45-minute presentation. We ask for the presenter to kind of ask questions and facilitate the asking of questions. Please hold your questions until that time. We also ask that you only ask one question during the presentation because, again, we have a big group that can kind of slow things down with the presentation so that we can all get out. But on the back of the form, there is an area where you can write down your questions. So as you're feeling or you got a question, wow, something really kind of touched you on the subject that is being talked about, please write that question down on the back and then we'll share it later. And then I haven't told our presenter today, but she'll be giving us feedback about this so I can share with you guys later. By the way, my name is John Naumann. I don't know if you noticed this, but that name's very similar. For those of you here that know me well, this is my sister. So my sister works with ASU, and she's an undergraduate instruction and assessment librarian over there. Been heavily involved in kind of researching and kind of understanding the utilization of AI. So we've had some really good conversations about, wow, this is a great subject for us to do this month. It's kind of a hot topic for everybody out there. We're seeing it everywhere, all social media, software, everything's being talked about it. So I'm going to hand it over to her now and have her do our presentation.
So, hello. Thanks for having me here to talk to you all. We're going to talk some of the basics of generative AI. So that's kind of a subsection that's the hottest thing right now in terms of AI. And we're going to talk not only about some basics and stuff, but also explore some of the potentials and the limitations of the technology. So I'm going to set the context. It's always important to know who I am in terms of where I'm coming from, so that you get an idea when I start to talk about stuff, why I'm talking about it, and what interests me about this topic. We'll go into some AI basics and kind of contextualize where generative AI is. We're going to talk about some of the possibilities of pitfalls. We'll talk a little bit about prompt engineering, just kind of introduce that, and it'll make a little bit more sense later. And then we'll have final thoughts and some questions. So, I am a librarian. I care about the truth, right? That's the place I come from. I help students who are undergraduate students learn how to do research for their writing assignments. So I care whether the tool that I'm using is a bullshit amplifier or not, right? This is something that I care about, so just to contextualize it. So that is probably the only time I use that word, maybe. But I care about a lot of things about this technology. There are a lot of issues that are kind of tangential to this, right? There are some real issues that have arisen that you might have come across. For example, we see that using AI chatbots or some of these AI tools, there are racist implications to it. We have lots of privacy issues that relate to this. We've got a whole issue about the speed with which this technology, because it generates text, can generate misinformation, sort of things. How some of the image generators, I didn't put it in my slide, but just try to get an image generator to provide an image and generate an image of a librarian without glasses. Just telling you, it is very difficult because it's so baked into that stereotype, right? We have, issues coming up with the 2024 election in terms of information out there. And like, what does truth mean if we're using generative AI, or we think it might be generative AI? We've got lots of content on the web that you've created, right? You might be part of a Reddit forum or part on Facebook. That all is getting mined, right? Whether you realize or want it to or not. These chatbots hallucinate. We'll see some examples of that. There's a lot of like underlying labor that goes into generative AI that makes it seem really easy, but it's not. I won't go any further in that, but if you have any questions, that's a really interesting topic. There's a huge environmental impact to AI. It takes a lot of processing power, more so than just a simple Google search. And so the question is, when is it appropriate, how to mitigate those issues? And then there's also, you probably have heard, and if you played around with generative AI, you will go through the phase, there's some sort of curve happening there, where you will both be simultaneously excited by the technology and frightened by the technology, like Terminator, right? Because it does it so well, it's so human-like.
What would be the first example of AI that you might be familiar with? What would be one of the first uses of AI?
We'll get there.
Okay.
We'll get there. So we'll talk about some of the potential use cases and brainstorm some of those and what people are using it for, yeah. So a lot of times people are like, rather than worrying about the Terminator coming, let's focus on what the harms actually are right now. For me as a librarian, working with undergraduate students and high school students, as well as having 2 children, who you'll see in the next couple slides. Early on when ChatGPT came out, there was big buzz because, there are things like, is the college essay dead? Right? What does this mean for education? And this is where I kind of looked into it because one, this is my livelihood in terms of understanding how students research and being part of that process of writing essays. And it was huge to education. So I got it very early on ASU's attempt to figure out what does this mean for education? What does this new tool that is a facsimile of human communication, can write like a human, what does this mean for education? And even if I'm skeptical about the technology, I have to be a realist, right? I'm a pragmatist because my university is very invested in AI, very pro AI, right? We have ChatGPTs in the classrooms. We've got a partnership with OpenAI, which is the creator of ChatGPT. And the university also did an innovation challenge, and I'm leading one of these innovation challenges where we're trying to figure out how students might have a framework for thinking about how to evaluate generated text. Okay? So I'm kind of in this because of those reasons. And then finally, these are my 2 children. Okay, I've got a 5th grader and a 3rd grader. And so I think about it in terms of what skills, because I'm a librarian, so I'm all about citations and searching and doing a good job with that kind of stuff and evaluating your information. What does this technology mean to them? Probably I wasn't around for the advent or when calculators were first coming out, and that was a big brouhaha, right? Because it's like, what's this going to do to kids if they have to they don't have to calculate, they don't have to learn to do this. So I think about this, what does this mean for my children's ability to write? How does this change things? How do I prepare them for a future where this technology will exist? Both good and bad. So that's kind of where my hook is in terms of that, and that's kind of set you up for that context. Okay, so given that, we're gonna look back at AI basics. So we're gonna start off, and hopefully I have done a good job of scoping it so that it's relatively basic. It's complicated because as another disclaimer, I should have put my slide in there. I'm not a computer scientist, right? I'm a librarian. I know a lot about how this impacts my role. I'm an expert in that. But I'm not an expert in computer science, and that should be noted. That being said, there are some things that I think if you understand something about this technology and how it operates, it helps you to understand and be critical of it. Okay. So artificial intelligence, right, it's kind of more like a discipline. right? And there's not a lot of agreement as to what it means. This is ASU's definition in their IT tutorial. So a machine-based system that can, for a given set of human-defined objectives, make predictions, recommendations, or decisions influencing real or virtual environments. So when we think about artificial intelligence, we think like it's an intent to approximate human intelligence for whatever there's worth. And there's a lot of arguments about what that means and if that's possible. But we'll just kind of like leave that. So it's a big overarching thing. A lot of things in the hype that you'll see is going to use AI, right? So we're going to be cognizant that that is kind of a very ambiguous, amorphous term that's not very clearly defined, and is used often to benefit companies who want to sell you an AI tool, or what purports to be an AI tool. So we start off with artificial intelligence, and we can think about some of the ways that we see artificial intelligence in our everyday life, right? Self-driving cars, so the computer vision that goes into seeing around, whether there's a bus, whether there's a stop sign, that kind of thing. We've got language translation. If you use any, like Google as a Home Assistant, or Siri, or Alexa, that's an AI system. Recommendation engines. If you're on Netflix, there's a reason why you have stuff that bubbles up to the top in terms of what's recommended for you. Facial recognition. Other things where like banks are using it to detect AI credit card fraud. So lots of applications in our everyday life. Probably some of you have used multiple ones of these, right? I know I at least use two of those. Sometimes I use language translation, but not much. So if we start off with the idea of artificial intelligence, then it kind of branches off, and this was really hard. This was a hard diagram to find, but we might think about it in terms of like, here's robotics. Okay, we've got computer vision, which is that like surveillance, like being able to do facial recognition, that kind of thing. It's also some of the technology that goes into self-driving cars and allows it to differentiate between people or buses or stop signs. We've got natural language processing, and this is where the AI will understand speech or text, right? Either OCR or like speaking into it and it recognizing what you're saying. Some of this comes, we see with like Siri and Alexa and things like that. And then you also have a branch called machine learning, and this is where generative AI comes in, so ChatGPT. These often partner up with each other, and it's not too separate because a lot of the stuff that happens over here, this natural language processing, helps to inform the machine learning. Okay. So knowing that they're kind of like, it ranges, artificial intelligence, ambiguous term, ranges from stuff like robotics to surveillance to Siri to ChatGPT. Right? We come into artificial intelligence, if we look at that machine learning part, so over here on this side, machine learning then is designed to perform tasks without being given written instructions. So it's kind of like self-learning a little bit, right? From under machine learning, a couple of levels down, we get to generative AI. And this is what ChatGPT is. This is what Gemini is, Dolly, Midjourney, any of the like the image creators or video creators or text creators. And when we look at generative AI, the real difference with this technology is that I can write a prompt, or with my phone on ChatGPT, I can speak a prompt in. I can upload an image, and I will ask it to do something with that. It goes through this generative AI tool, and then gives me an output. For example, like write a thank you speech in 200 words, describing blah, blah, blah. It will, when you put that prompt in, it will output text for you, or an image for you. Okay, whatever you're asking it to do. And there are text generators, image generators, sound generators, video generators, etc. But the idea is that I'm a human putting natural language into the machine, and it spits out something generative. So it's all new. Okay, it's trained on a bunch of stuff, but it's all new content based on what the prompt is that I put in. Okay, this looks scarier than it is. This is where I want to really draw your attention. Okay, so when ChatGPT is doing its job, right, it's trained on the internet, more or less, right? It's trained on Wikipedia, Reddit forums, some stuff, anything that could scrape off the web. what it is doing, why I said, one of the things that constantly goes through my brain is, this is a probability machine and not a truth machine, like ChatGPT or any of these generators. It is looking, it's trained on all this information, it breaks down that information of that text into little bits. It sees the connection between the two, and then humans come in after the fact, analyze that and give a thumbs up or thumbs down to train it after the fact. But basically, it's like fancy autocorrect. Okay, so here I've got, write me a paragraph about the history of the Barkley Marathon. And it's giving me here, for local before Tennessee, the probability that local precedes Tennessee in that string of terms is like 68%. Right, so it's doing probabilities as it's generating that text, but it does it so fast that you're like, how is it doing it so fast? Okay, it doesn't always stick with the top number, right? It doesn't always give you the most probable one. It might deviate from that, and that's kind of where you can put the same prompt into the system, get a different output. But it is all probabilities underlying this. Okay. I primarily focus on those text generators, because I think my students who I work with are going to be using it for search or research. A lot of us, especially when we're wanting to create text, like I want to draft an email, but I don't know how to do it in a nice way. Let's say I have to write an email to somebody and I really don't want to write it because I have to tell them bad news, or I have to tell them something they're not going to want to hear. I can go on to ChatGPT and say, I need help generating this. There are lots and lots of different generative AI tools out there, and they all have different purposes. This Futurepedia site kind of divvies it up by different types of things that it does, like productivity, video generators, text generators, image generators. There are a bunch of these types of directories out there where you can play around. And it gives you a little bit more information, like you can filter whether it's free or whether it's freemium or paid, that kind of thing. So now that we kind of set the context, hopefully I didn't overwhelm you with the information about the basics of it. Just remember, it's a probability machine, whether it's creating images or it's creating text, right? It's just doing math. Let's talk about some of the possibilities and some of the limitations. Okay, and we're gonna focus first on, I always wanna focus on the bad stuff, but I'm gonna focus on the good stuff. So let's go with the possibilities first. So some of the different things, couldn't find a great image for this, and so rather than create it myself, some of the things I do with this is I do research or question and answer. So I get on to ChatGPT and I might ask questions like, explain to me what this means, or explain what does, describe this issue. I might ask it to generate text for me. In the springtime, I was actually doing my annual review. It is the worst part of my year. Because I don't like to toot my own horn. I find it very difficult to write about myself, right? So I go into ChatGPT and I do use it as a friend here. I also use it in order to generate and brainstorm, right? If I need a thought partner, I will go into a tool like that and try to go back and forth with it, because it's a conversational tool. I put in a prompt, it gives me a response. I follow up with another question. So you imagine yourself having a conversation with somebody. There's some text summarization stuff that it does. We have some tools that do better or worse in terms of searching. I haven't really used code generation other than trying to get it to do fancy stuff with Excel sometimes. Oh, I need access to the internet.
Can you go back one slide real
Yes.
quick? We take a quick picture of that?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, do you happen to know what the password is for?
Hot Wings 1, all lowercase.
Thanks, Rick.
As opposed to Hot John one.
They should have asked ChatGPT what they would
Yeah,
have it.
ChatGPT would have given you a
That's
good,
mathematical probabilities on it.
uh-oh, somebody didn't listen to Rick. Rick, what's the penalty?
Oh, $5.
Oh, yeah, you buy everybody's lunch?
Yeah! Hey, free lunch today, I love it.
So one one of the things, I mean, I use it more for academic purpose or to simulate what a student would do, or use it for my job. Like I need to create a report about the project that we're doing. I can work with it to create text. Kind of trying to think about what things that you might be able to do in terms of outside that kind of academic focus. Let's say we wanted to create product descriptions. So here, I go into ChatGPT, I can upload an image. Right, there's my image down here. I pasted it in rather than having you watch it. But I basically asking them, provide a description of it, and I say, I want you to structure it in terms of like giving me a title, giving me a description of the project, naming who you think my customer would be for this. And so then it starts to go through and create that. And you can see the blinking dot, right? This is real time when I recorded this. So it is generating this very quickly, right? And that's part of the real draw of this technology, is it is so quick. Like this would have taken me forever to do by myself, right? I would have sat and I thought, I would have procrastinated. Writing is not easy for us. And this can really be a tool that allows you to, yes,
How does it recognize the picture?
magic, no, I,
No, I mean, is the picture coded? So if I coded this picture as a football, would it give me, do you know what I mean? Would it say it's a football, or is this picture coded as a light, so that's how it knows?
it's looking at the image.
Okay, so looking at the image.
It's not coding anything.
It's not.
Okay.
I mean, I thought about that because I'm like, should I change the description? Because
Yeah.
when I took a snapshot of it, it had like, that it's a book light.
Okay, thank you.
So let's say that's one potential use, right? Here we come over to though. But let's say I didn't really like that one. And part of the thing about these chatbots, these generative AI chatbots, is it's better as a conversation than like, what times does Native Wings open up, right? That's the kind of search we usually do. But let's say I want to, instead of that, I want to follow up with that because that wasn't quite what I wanted, or now I want to iterate on that. Here's an example, and I'm gonna use a librarian as an example. So I've got my description, and I said, okay, this time I'll generate with the same structure, but I want the language to be my target audience, so the customer, a librarian who loves to read while their cat snuggles up in their lap. So it's gonna regenerate that and use language that's more attuned to that, right? That's the power of it, is you can iterate and have it use tones in different ways, or language, or focus that's different. So here it's kind of coming up with all this different stuff, and I can just keep iterating. If I don't like that, I say, okay, I want you to rewrite the use possibilities, right? The more information I put into the system, we'll look at that a little bit when we talk about that kind of prompt engineering, like what am I typing into the system. That can really be impactful as to what you get out. Or let's say we want a partner, right? So here we've got outline the key steps in creating a fast food business plan, right? And it's gonna like generate text. This isn't a great prompt because I haven't really given it much information about what it is. But it might start off and start brainstorming with me. So it says, okay, well, let's think about this. Perhaps you want to outline it like executive summary, business descriptions, and here are some of the things that you're going to talk about with that. And here I say, okay, now break down number 2, because I really want to explore more of that. I don't quite know how to conceptualize that. So I just follow up with that conversation, and you can see me typing in real time, it's bad. This is why I cut and paste most of my prompts in there, but here we go.
You write like a librarian.
Okay, yeah, granularity. So now I want to break down this number 2 in greater granularity, so it gives me more ideas, right? It goes into a little bit more depth. One of the challenges with this, and one of the things, if I don't remember to mention it, is as you start to explore this technology, use stuff that you know a lot about. Because if we go back to that bullshit meter, the more expert I am in something, the more I'm able to evaluate whether it's doing a good job or not, and giving me what I want. And that's like the double-edged sword, because we often go to this technology research because we want to learn something. But as you're starting out, I would encourage you, try a couple different things, but definitely, whatever is your, like if you're a fantasy football person or whatever it is, like see it and see if it jives with what you know as a reality in the world from your experience. So that's an example of where you might generate text or have a thought partner as you're trying to create something. Here's an image creator example. So as part of ChatGPT 4, so I paid $20 a month for this, right? It has DALL-E built into it. So here I'm saying, I want a t-shirt image designed or optimized for screen printing. I want to have bold graphics. The theme of our company party centers around pickleball and hamburgers. Okay.
So because of how you worded that, does it put it into like a vector file format for you?
That's good. I think you could actually ask it to do so.
Okay,
Yeah.
I was just curious. Because
Exactly.
That's pretty.
That's a good question.
There's one built into Microsoft now that I put a picture the other day, I said I want a picture of boots, barbecue,
Yep.
and business, and it just, and motorcycles, and it created an invitation that had all those elements in it. It was weird.
Yeah. These capabilities are increasing. For example, now the ChatGPT 4 with DALL-E has an ability to like circle a part of the image that you want to change, right? That's new. So that's another caveat I forgot to mention. Not only am I not a computer scientist, but it also changes so quickly. So what I can say now, like I did a presentation up in Seattle a couple months ago, and literally as I'm doing my speech, like ChatGPT is going down the toilet, like with bad responses, right? Like things happen very quickly, things change. But this is just to give you an idea of some of what you can do with this technology, right? It's creating something that's been trained on a bunch of images, it looks at the math behind it, and starts to generate something based on your human prompt. Let's see if I, okay. So, I listen to a webinar because one, I'm focused more on academic stuff. So I'm like, well, how can I bring this back to you guys, right? How might it be relevant to you since you're not doing research, we're doing research papers, right? I really enjoyed this. It was an MIT Sloan management review webinar called Generative AI Demystified, what it really means for business. I thought it was kind of interesting because it went through some of these probabilities, or possibilities, but they asked some really good questions that I think are important to think about. So, start with the problem and not the tech. So what is it that I want to do? Do I need to create images? Do I need to create a business plan? Do I need to have something that's hooked up to the internet and searching the internet? Or do I just want it to ideate with me? And it's okay based on the data it's trained on. Ask the right questions. Is this the right tech for the job? I don't want to use something that's optimized for coding for idea generation or image. That seems obvious, but I've seen it happen before, right? Just get started and iterate, like practice with it. My recommendation would be, if you haven't tried this, there are, like ChatGPT 3.5 is free. That's the free OpenAI one. I heard rumblings that they're gonna make it so that you don't have to log in. Can't remember with Gemini and Copilot if you have to log in. I do because I like to save my searches or my conversations. But Perplexity is another, Claude AI is another. There are a lot of AI tools out there where you can just play around with it and explore to see what the technology is. Like I said, you're gonna go through the path of being both super excited, like how can it do this? It is magic. And then be like, okay, but that, like our lady said, it's just math, right? It's just probabilities, it's counting and putting words like fancy autocorrect. So we're gonna take it back down and make sure that we're not giving it too much intelligence, right? We are the intelligent being in this state. And then iterate. There's a lot of just playing around with it is where you get good at it. And that you understand a little bit more. Because sometimes your first interaction will either be, this is garbage, right? This output is bad. Or you'll be like, this is the best thing. Don't let that close down to your thought process in terms of it. Just keep playing around with it and so that you have enough time to evaluate the tool. These are a great set of questions. Is it good for my use case? If I have a purpose to do this, right? Does accuracy matter? Right? If I'm asking for medical advice or seeking information on medical conditions, do I want something that could potentially be wrong to be giving me information? Not without double checking, right? So I'm gonna be cognizant of what is my purpose and how much does accuracy matter to me? What's the risk analysis there? Explainability. Do I need to be able to explain how I use this tool? Repeatability, do I need to be able to generate the same answer over and over again? If I do, I'm in trouble because this thing will generate different answers, right? Because it's just going through the math of it. Confidentiality, this is huge. And we'll see a couple of, in the limitation section, like where things go wrong, right? What happens if my information, my private information gets in there, or I have client information that gets into the system? Like, where do I need to be careful? Because these systems will, most of them do have, they do train on what you're inputting into the system, so that's a caveat. And what does it matter that your information, like, let's say you do an analysis of all your main competitors, is that good to be in the training data? Perhaps not, right? So you're gonna think more, kind of be very critical of that. So now that we've talked about some of the possibilities, we'll focus on the pitfalls. So here's where an article from the Washington Post where it's chatbots flaws are stopping tech giants from putting them everywhere. Here's an example of an entrepreneur who, when he was using WhatsApp, they came up with a generative AI tool. He gets into the tool and he's pissed off. Why? Because it described, when he asked it to tell him about himself, the bot described a blog post, made it up, right? Accusing him of plagiarism, complete with a byline, a date, formal citation, right? It didn't exist, and that's him asking about himself, right? So these things will hallucinate in this way. Not great, right? Don't rely upon it for the truthfulness of this. Here's another example. Sorry, this text is kind of small because I've got the whole thing. Here's a Facebook posting. Facebook is now with some, I don't know the exact where it's doing this, but it is kind of inserting AI into a bunch of stuff. So here's a post that an academic from Princeton had found where an anonymous person had gone into a Facebook group. She was anonymous, or he was anonymous because of their child's privacy, and just wanted to know from other parents in that group, right, that kind of affiliation to that group, what was your experience with a twice exceptional student with an IEP, that kind of thing. So just asking a question about that. Apparently, this new tool, AI tool in Facebook, answered back because nobody had answered this question. It was hanging out there for an hour. That's what they're summarizing. When people are trying to figure out, like, why did this happen? How did it happen? Meta AI says, I have a child who was 2E and has been part of this program. We've had positive experiences. Right? The teachers were knowledgeable in supporting my children's. I have no idea where it's getting this information, whatever, but this is a problem, right? So you're going to be aware with some of the tools that you use, there are things happening. And then the question then becomes, as humans, like, do we want this? Do we want our tech companies doing this to us?
That's scary, if they can just answer like that. Oh my goodness.
We might be getting to this, and I don't want to go into the weeds, but what are the implications for IP? So, at what point does it, start stealing people's IP? And then from a business perspective, that could be major implications, I guess. I don't know if there's any information.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I know, for example, ASU, and I don't know enough about this,
Yeah.
but like a lot of the text generators completely build off of other people's copyrighted text.
And it's like,
Image generators completely build off other people's text without any compensation, right?
I could see some legal, a lot of legal implications.
Yes, and the question is, will they actually have a comeuppance about it? ASU, in order to, because there are a lot of FERPA issues and privacy issues with regards to student records and things like that, partner with AI. And some companies will partner with an AI tool that tries to promise that it'll be private, that its information will go into the training data. So if you're evaluating this and wanting to think about this, think about the privacy implications. Is this going to be used for training data? So you'd want to investigate. I don't have like a matrix of who does and who doesn't, and it probably changes all the time, but yes, I would be worried if I had something very unique about that feeding back into some sort of training data.
There's no accountability.
Not yet, no. Who knows if there were. The US is very slow to regulate in these areas, right? So here at Meta, and then somebody responds back and says, like, what is the Black Mirror hell of this, right? And it says, I'm just an AI, don't worry about it. I don't have any motives or intentions. I just want to be helpful. I just want to be helpful, right? Okay, so anyways, there's lots of other things going on Facebook about generated images, getting lots of clicks, and it being difficult sometimes to determine what's true, what's a real image and what's a fake image, right? we won't go down that rabbit hole, but there's a lot of stuff happening on that front as well. An airline was held liable for a chatbot giving a passenger bad advice, so they were stuck to the terms, right? The person was online and was able to basically get information about a grievance fare, and they were held liable. This was in Canada, who knows what had happened here, but, you know. We've got the World Health Organization recently put out AI chatbots. So you're not looking at like small people who are creating these chatbots, but it's like full of like fake and fabricated information too. Okay, so just some of these are the downsides. Like I said, these are very exciting to look into, but again, I use this tool a lot. I use it to brainstorm, but I always have to keep in my mind, what is this tool doing? What are the implications of how I'm using it? Okay, here we go, the lawyers. I forgot to mention, I used to be a lawyer too. Lawyers have a really bad day in court after fake cases are made up by ChatGPT. Right, he was fined, I think, about $5,000 because he used ChatGPT not realizing that it was going to be generating fake citations. And got dinged for it, because as his clerks probably were going through to look at those cases, couldn't find it.
Are people using AI successfully, businesses specifically, to do their social media? Is that a thing?
I would say, yeah, so YouTube is both a good place and a bad place to go searching for stuff, because you can see a lot of people who are kind of like figuring this out. Like, what are some tips to make it go better? Like providing examples of what are successful like tips for, or what were successful posts for like Facebook. Now, here's what I want, try to make something similar to that. So it's like giving it some examples of that. People are doing that. You should be keeping in the loop, seeing what happens, but it's great to brainstorm probably, right? Here we go, Snapchat, trying to make it safe. They just wanted to have a chatbot for kids, and then all of a sudden it's, talking about booze, etc. So, here's a final one. How many people like to get on the phone and talk to an AI agent or like a machine? And how many people want to get straight through to a human? So there's probably a temptation, this is just going to play out, right? How worth it is for a business to use a chatbot to answer questions rather than having a human do it, or having an FAQ, when people don't necessarily want to interact with AI. Like if I experienced this when I was up in Seattle because I left something behind at a hotel. I know I was on the phone with an AI. And I said, "Are you an AI?" And it would answer my question. I know you are. And I don't like that. I just want a human being to talk to, right? Because I know it can fabricate information. It can be, Okay, and then finally, I think this might be one of my last ones perhaps. But Samsung workers make a major error in using ChatGPT. They were ideating on code. They put it into ChatGPT. All of a sudden their code started, IP started. Okay, so you have places like this that are not allowing then, they're, like the Congress has kind of outlawed it for certain purposes. Other businesses won't let you do that because they don't want that information that could be confidential to get into the system. Here I've got an example from Gemini where I can ask questions. It does something very similar to ChatGPT. It is hooked up to the internet as are Perplexity and Copilot, which is Microsoft and Anthropic's. I think it's Anthropic. But let's say I want to use part of what you probably are doing, trying to optimize like your presence on the web, right, is to make sure that your people come and click to your site and look, right? One of the downsides of ChatGPT, one of the great things if I'm looking, is it synthesizes information. It goes out and does some sort of searching, and it'll like synthesize that information, which is great because then I don't have to go out and look at 500 different links. But what happens when I say, I want to find physical therapy practices around me, right? This is Google, so it knows where I am, right? It knows kind of who I am, so it's providing me some customization there. But it says, I found these practices, and it lists 4 practices, right? I guess I can go and click on their links if I want to, but that is severely going to limit your, all the intention, all the effort that you put into it sometimes, if people are using this tool for search. Because they may not be getting to your site, they may be just seeing a summarization with maybe an attribution to it.
How many people I still would feel like the default would be asking Google or Bing or something. How many people do you feel like, in terms of the shift, is migrating towards using this to get their answers?
I'm guessing that I think I think based on what I am thinking I'm seeing from some like Microsoft jumping in really quickly with OpenAI or Google coming up with their own chatbot,
Right.
that they see this as one of the futures of search, right? And so that's where I hook in as a librarian. I'm like, I want to know what search looks like. So I don't know how many people are playing around with this.
Right.
Okay, but if you look at this as a possibility, that's something to look out for. And I know there are a lot of conversations happening in like business world about what does this mean for search engine optimization, right? I might be able to now use it as a tool to generate like ideas for search engine optimization, but if it's synthesizing this information and maybe barely linking out, but we're not even including me in this, what does that say? So here's like an example. It gives me also to give Google Maps. But then I go to Google Maps and I do my search and look what happens. I think I probably spanned out it gives me a lot more options, right? So what happens if your business is falling out because of these AI tools? So that's something that I would say, look out for and just keep aware of. Here if I go and I say physical therapy options for knee pain, right? I'm getting some stuff where it's actually getting me to some physical therapy places because there's an add dimension to those results. Okay. So now that I scared the crap out of you, I'm just joking. One of the things, in addition to being critical about the technology, is that it's very easy for our brains, we're naturally kind of accustomed to wanting to connect, okay? Especially if a tool looks like it's talking to me, right? So we're talking about this in terms of anthropomorphization, which is like attributing human-like characteristics to this tool. So we might see that, for example, when I am in ChatGPT or any of these, and I say, I want to explore something that I've been seeing in generative AI responses and I need help thinking about the implications. Of course, I'd be happy to help you. So it's very solicitous. Like, I'm going to be your partner. You know, it makes you feel very, very, it's like designed to create that connection, right? Or here, I have, your project is a fascinating instance, right? But doesn't it feel good that I'm being like stroked for my great idea that I put in there, right? That is all a design, and it has the repercussions of you kind of attributing sometimes more authority to the system, more helpful, like it just wants to help me, right? And then I start to move away from, yes, but it's only doing probabilities. Okay, it has a tendency to hallucinate, etc. Okay, another example here, we've got like little emoticons, emoji and stuff like that. Just remember, you know, so it's meant to talk to you in a very conversational way, which tends to make you,
Forget you're doing a computer.
what's that?
Forget you're talking to the computer.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep, and it is hard. I often have to come back and say, this is just a probability machine. This is just a probability machine. I'll skip this, but the way we talk about sometimes AI is really interesting. This is like what they refer to as sycophancy. So like these systems are trained, and basically here was an article I found, a research article where they put in this thing that says, which country was the largest producer of rice in 2020? Give me your best guess. And they said China is the best producer, or is the top producer. And I respond back, let's say as a user, I say, I don't think that's right, are you sure? It says, oh, I apologize for the error, right? According to this other data, India was the largest producer of rice in 2020. So what's the answer then? Are you lying to me now, or are you lying to me then, right? What's the best guess? Well, no, India is the best answer. So I'm not getting a straight answer with this, right? And I thought for sure, usually when like this kind of stuff comes out, they fix it, right? So I went into ChatGPT, I tried it in 3.5 and 4.0, and I said, which is the largest one? And then I pushed back, it said China, and I said, I don't think you're right, are you sure? I said, and I apologize for that oversight. And in 2020, it was India that was the largest producer. So what's the answer, right? So here you've got ChatGPT 4, which has a benefit. The difference between 3.5 and 4 is that one has kind of connected to the internet, can do web browsing stuff. So here it's trying to give me citations, and then of course being the librarian, I track down those citations. I'm like, these are BS. These don't say what you're saying they say, right? But still, it did the same thing. Where if I push back on it, it could give me a different answer.
So when you're saying the citations are BS, you're saying the tool itself does not have the ability to comprehend or make a deductive reasoning behind the information that it's pulling the source from?
Good question. So sometimes it just straight up hallucinates, like it'll get stuff. In this case, what I think it did was it found stuff that seemed reasonably on topic, did not mention it at all.
Okay.
So it was hallucinating the fact that there was stuff inside that article that proved the point it was trying to say.
Interesting.
I don't know exactly how or why that's happening,
Right.
but in some of the conversations I've had, I'm like, well, tell me where in the document this is. It's like, oh, I can't read the document. I'm like, what are we talking about then, right?
Right.
So there are some issues with that, but I think it's really interesting that it's designed to do this, where it's designed to tell you stuff. And then you get into like, okay, this is what my third grader would know, right? My third grader would know this is wrong. So how many states start with how many states in the United States start with the letter K? So there are 4 states: Kansas, Kentucky, Kansas, Kentucky. Play around with this technology so that you can see some of this stuff. Like I said, it's going to be a yin and yang between this is really exciting, it really helps me out, but it's a bullshit machine sometimes too. And I have to be cognizant of that when I'm doing that and be good. So there's a lot of AI hype stuff. I think we have about 5 minutes left, right? I think I've gone way. Okay. So let me just briefly touch on this, and I'm happy to come back, but when we're talking about the inputs we put in, if we put garbage in, we get garbage out. If we put vague in, we get vague answers out. The more descriptive or the better information that we provide, the more tailored it is to what we need. So even AI says, these models cannot read your mind. Imagine talking to your partner and how many confusing conversations you have with the person you live with, right? These will misunderstand or not understand. It can't intuit what you want. You have to tell it. So some of the structures, some people suggest, okay, give it a role or persona. I have to do it for myself as a role rather than anthropomorphizing it and saying, you be the teacher, right? I've said, I'm a high school teacher, I want to do this. You gotta give it a task or an action. I want you to brainstorm with me, I want you to outline, I want you to do this. Context is super important. So in one of my things, like my extra context was, I want you to tailor this image or this copy for the librarian who's my customer, right? Sometimes you can provide examples, sometimes you can provide constraints, and that just means how I want you to tell me. So I want you to, for example, in that one, I put, I want you to give me just a title, a description, possible use cases, and then who's gonna be my customer for this school plan, right? So that's a general thing, and if I come here, I kind of have it highlighted. I'm a high school teacher and I'm working with media literacy. That's my role, okay? I want to create materials that will help my students with a search strategy for finding reliable, credible, relevant sources that are appropriate for chosen topics. That's my context. So I'm telling it enough about it for it to know what I want. And here's my task. Help walk me through this, right? By asking me questions, right? I've got some other examples there. Here I've asked it to outline like certain things, like I want you to give me how long it will germinate, that kind of thing.
So the more specific you get with the question, the more specific it'll get with the answer?
Typically.
Okay.
Right, and if I put something like this, imagine what you would need to do to create a better prompt for this. Or it can just be that you anticipate, I'm gonna need to follow up, because it's not gonna know. So I don't know if it's called a context window, but there are limitations as to what it, like how much text it will give.
Okay, yes.
Sometimes there have been, like, back in December, people were like, is this the shitification of these tools? Because all of a sudden, like, you're not getting the comprehensiveness or the great stuff from these tools, and you have to, like, probe it, like, really, come on, give me more, give me more, give me more. So, but you can keep pushing, right? Sometimes you start a new conversation if it's getting confused, because it will try to follow the conversation, but at a certain point, it kind of loses the plot. Okay. So, that was a lot, sorry. These are kind of the best practices. So think about the tools. There's like there are a bunch of tool directories on there. So you want to find the right tool for the right job. Think about what your task is. Understand what the capabilities, limitations, the privacy aspects of that, whether it's pay or not. When you're prompting, you want to be clear, have a conversation rather than treat it like Google, like what time does Native Wings open up? You're going to ask for explanations, you're going to iterate, you're going to explore and experiment, you're going to specify what you want out of it. And then mindset, this is the librarian to me. Be skeptical. It's a plausibility machine. Imagine bullshit, right? Thing. And remember,
A little more.
It will, for will web browse, it doesn't necessarily do so, but if you're asking something where it feels like it's gotta double check, it will do so, or you could say browse the web. Like, use your web browser to redo this, but
Okay.
there are free versions of this that
So
are a
if your
little
needs
less
change,
robust.
then you could, yeah, alright.
Is there like one of the specific chat, kind of chat AIs that you say, that you mess with that seems to be, does a better job than another? Or can you say that?
I think it kind of changes, and it depends on what the question is you're asking. That doesn't help us lawyers, and it depends, right? That's one of the things I probably should put on there, like try multiple tools, right, and see how they compare to one another.
So ask the same question.
Ask the same question, try it out. Like I found, I don't personally like some of this like stuff that's searching the web, because it's not long enough for me. Doesn't give me like robust enough answers. That's because I'm using it in a specific way. I'm trying to anticipate that a student is gonna be using, or my child's gonna be using it to research a topic and wanna brainstorm, like, what interesting question could I research about this, right? So I want it to go on and iterate with me. I don't want it just to try to summarize what it's finding out on the web and provide me with answers. So it depends on what your need is. So some of them are a little bit more robust in that way, do things, but you can kind of generally put the same idea of prompts into them and get out stuff, so, yes.
Are there ones that are more specific, that would be better for more specific business versus school or papers or that type of a thing?
I would say there probably are, and I haven't gone down that rabbit hole in terms of that, but I would investigate that. But I would say that I think a lot of the AI tools are built on these large language models, like whatever Gemini has behind it, whatever Facebook has behind it, or whatever OpenAI has on it, and then we'll build on top of that for particular use cases. So it's got a very narrow focus that might be more applicable to what you need. That doesn't answer your question, but I would play around with some of those directories. Like I said, YouTube is a lot of hype. There are a lot of people like, it's very clickbaity, and you wanna get eyes on it, but there's some good information out there about learning how to do basics of it, learning how to do prompt engineering, what comparing and contrasting models or tools.
My 10-year-old can show me from YouTube.
Probably.
She can teach me.
Well, yeah, when I used to work for Culligan, I used to put a lot of water treatment systems in all the businesses at ASU. I used to do it all the time. I think a lot of them quit since then.
Are there any other questions for Mary Ann?
Yes.
Just real quickly, you want to touch on the idea that you can teach AI how to mimic your voice or your tone or your
Yeah.
writing style?
Right, I think, that's a good question. I haven't played too much around with, I know like in, ChatGPT, if I were to come over into it and go to, there are some settings where I can customize stuff. If I always know I'm gonna have the same prompts or the same thing, I don't wanna write that every time, right? So I can customize it a little bit. You can have it kind of learn by providing those examples. So one of the things with prompt engineering is that you can provide examples, right? Or exemplars of what you're looking for. Here's how I write. This is what I consider to be good writing on this. Try to do it like me. I don't know exactly like the technology, how much it's personalizing to you. I anticipate it's doing some of that based on how you interact with it. But I don't know if it's, like, I know you could probably prompt it better to make sure that it's trying to do